So just to put our school in context, as everyone else has, we're 11 to 16 secondary school in Cwmbran, and our current roll is just shy of 1,200. And that's our full capacity. However, it's about to go over next year. And thereafter, probably the students that are eligible for free school meals it's about 32%, so it is really high following COVID. But obviously, there's been a huge shift then in need as a result. We've got about 25% of students identified with additional learning needs as well, but a very small number of students with English as an additional language. And if you just go to the next slide, please, Leanne. So obviously, I'm not sure how much you know about our school. We've been on a really exciting journey over the past few years. We've had a variety of senior leadership, and we've been in special measures, and then we came out. We went in 2020, just before COVID, and we came out in November 21. So we weren't in it for very long, but there was sort of a rapid progress was made. Go on to the next slide, please. So the rationale behind what we decided, myself and the then literacy coordinator, decided to look obviously at our writing accuracy. We, like other schools, are very much aware that young people leave school. Those that leave without good literacy skills, they're held back. The most recent sort of estimates suggest the low-level literacy costs the UK economy at least 20 billion a year. So, and you can see from our results, our accuracy is in need of improvement. It's a similar story with Crossy as other schools. Our 2022 results showed that more than 50% of our pupils scored below half marks on writing accuracy for section B on both exam papers. And then if you move to the next slide, I think it's the next year. That's it, 23, thank you. Again, it's slightly improved, 35% of our pupils gaining half marks on writing accuracy. But obviously it was still a huge focus for us. Can you move on to the next slide, please, Leanne? So we heard about the writing revolution through the EAS and through EduTwitter, and different the heads of department meeting back in July 23 when the other case studies were shown on the previous cohort. I knew that it was something straight away that we had to introduce and we had to get on board with. So we felt that the writing structure, the way our students were writing their sentences, we weren't really teaching that. If truth be told, it was kind of an assumption that they would know, word classes, they would understand how to formulate a full sentence, simple, compound, complex, and so on. So it was really interesting, the training that the other case studies, that we were hearing. A major issue, obviously, we found with teaching literacy separately, because between 22 and 23 results, we decided to have a week-long literacy weeks after every half term, and we were sort of teaching literacy then in isolation. And while it did help our results initially, they weren't seeing that transferable skills as a result. And that's obviously where we hoped the writing revolution would help. So myself and the lead practitioner for literacy obviously signed up. And what he was going to look at, his GCSE class, I chose to look at a year 8 class, but also to try to incorporate it across our department by disseminating the sessions back to the rest of the department. We're a huge department during our meetings. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So the focus was to incorporate writing revolution strategies into our schemes of learning across all groups, but obviously have a focus with my year 8 and Adam's GCSE class. If you go to the next slide, please. So the next few slides sort of show the evidence of what we've been doing. And the Writing Revolution sessions, they were so well organised, structured. It was all easily accessible on Teams and Google Drive. Each session was really clear and beneficial to improving writing, and it was helpful. It was easy to disseminate it back to the rest of the department. And as a result, the Writing Revolution, while it's not been fully incorporated yet, you'll see in the next few slides that it is beginning to be embedded. If you go to the next slide, please. So as this slide shows, this is what I was sharing then back to the department, and we discussed the different strategies for each session. They then went off with their own current schemes or whatever they were teaching at that point, and tried to use different strategies within those classes, whether it was as do now activities or plenaries. Go to the next slide, please. So as you can see, these were some of the resources then that the department began to generate based on the strategies that we'd been taught in the Writing Revolution sessions. If you go to the next slide, please. One English teacher, and she's actually going to be our literacy coordinator next year. I'm really excited about this. She focused on her Year 7 class, Owen and the Soldier and Ghost Boys, and the focus was on sentences, obviously in fragments. Pupils really enjoyed those tasks. They were really successful in finding sentences and fragments from a page reference, and then were able to create their own examples and were able to challenge their peers. If you go to the next slide, please. The ultimate result was that pupils were now able to understand the parts of the sentences can be used varied sentence types in their own written work. Another focus was also on scrambled sentences. If you go to the next slide, please. I'm not sure actually these are in order of what, yeah, I think they are. Finally, then obviously all the work that was done on sentence expansion through the use of subordinating conjunctions and realising the importance of detail in answers by adding who, what, where and when. I think that was a previous slide. It did help pupils. The feedback that came was that it was really useful to pupils to be able to write ultimately at length. If you go to the next slide, please. Oh, and the next one. Okay, so these are some of the examples from my Year 8 class. We looked in the summer term, we've been looking at Gothic writing, but we looked at plays during the autumn term as well. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the difference. Obviously, we used the different sentence types with the class to enable them ultimately to write about Gothic literature in more detail. If you go to the next slide. You can see we used the summary structure, and for me that was so useful in a way of teaching and being able to give an overview, or for the pupils to give an overview on what they'd read, whether it was in an extract or to a longer chapter that we might have read, using the what, where, when, why and how structure. To be honest, I'm never going to move away from that now, and the rest of the department won't. So yeah, that's definitely a one to use for me. If you go to the next slide, please. There's quite a few of these slides, Leanne. Feel free to sort of move through them up to about slide 24 if you want. The next Adam's class, his GCSE class, this is it, the On of Mice and Men. His class really struggled to structure and expand their essays. Often their responses were quite undeveloped, as you can see. And despite students knowing the material well, they just weren't able to write about it. So the teacher used fragments, scrambled sentences, kernel sentences, if you go to the next slide, please, and questions as a form, sort of as a retrieval practice. And the next slide, please. They were really successfully implemented as starter activities, providing students an opportunity to recap information, provide frequent opportunities to practice their writing skills, and to encourage students to develop that topic paragraph, expand their answers, so that the teacher then would introduce the sentence fragment that had to be incorporated into their answers. Mr. Bunge felt that it really helped the pupils' cognitive understanding of that topic and helped the students consider how detail could be added to their response. For me, in my Year 8 class, if you want to go to the next slide, please, Leanne, like I've said already, that summary support structure is so essential. We also moved, as you saw from the previous slides, to the single paragraph outline. And again, some of my pupils, it was a Sec 3 Year 8 class, they would ask the question frequently at the start of the year, how many sentences does a paragraph need to be? Or how many lines does my paragraph have to be? The minute we use that single paragraph outline, and then obviously we use the multiple paragraph outline afterwards, they stopped asking those questions because they knew exactly what they needed to incorporate. So our next steps, as you can see from the board, we've just finished our exam season, and during this game time now, we've been embedding those strategies that we've used so far this year in elsewhere in the schemes of work that we haven't got around to in different lessons, and really highlighting and signposting where we can use them. We've got huge changes again next year in our department, and we've got 3 new members of our department that will be joining us, some of which aren't subject specialists. So the idea next year is obviously to continue to disseminate again what we've learned this year, really support our new staff to enable them to use the writing revolution strategies, because it's groundbreaking actually. Our literacy coordinator next year obviously has done a lot of this work as well with her Year 7 class, so she'll be feeding that out to on a whole school level. Again, we're hoping then there's nothing that's going to be achieved quickly. It's the long game, I guess. And it's hoped that after more department time, we'll be able to give support to teachers in other departments to help deliver those strategies further, and roll it out across the school. Again, like other departments, like other people have already said this afternoon, it's not been fully disseminated yet to the whole school for various reasons, but we're confident as an English department that once it is rolled out, ultimately it will be really successful. And I think there's maybe one more slide, but that's it really. I don't think I've said anything different to what the other people presenting have said. It was really useful, and I'd recommend any school to sign up to the Writing Revolution.